Who's that? Commander Claw. Who's bad? Commander Claw. Yo, 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 welcome back to another episode of Commander Claw. I'm back on the Duskmourn Commanders, and today, whatever time it is for you right now while you're watching this on YouTube, I'm bringing you Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. It's a rakdos commander on a 4/4 body, two colors, black and a red, legendary creature, and it is an Elder Demon. Okay, it comes from the Endless Punishment Precon. Super cool, by the way. This creature has flying, ward, where you pay 2 life. And it says, whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, and draw a card. So, I'm going to give you another slide where the abilities are bigger. Let's jump into it. So, what I really want to highlight on this slide is the ward effect. So, whenever an opponent or even yourself try to target Valgavoth, you have to pay 2 life. So, that automatically drains um, the opponent's life if they choose to target him, which would trigger Valgavoth. After that, you would most likely just try to keep him alive with some kind of, uh, protection spell. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I think you should build this deck really around and to really focus on Valgavoth compared to the Precon Endless Punishment. Okay, I promise you, I really believe this deck is going to be fun. It is going to play on the amount of cards in your opponent's hands. And the reason why is because the the amount of cards in opponent's hand for a rakdos type of build kind of, I would say, definitely determines the success factor of your rakdos build. Rakdos is going to be very explosive and kill opponents. So the theme that's going on here with this guide, it will be a discard theme. However, I will not be showing discarding effects. I'll be showing discarding payoffs that drain life. Hopefully you did not skip to the card. You heard how to play this. So remember, this is about discard payoffs, draining your opponent's life for the first time, triggering Valgavoth's effect, ultimately keeping him on the battlefield for more than one turn cycle. Each turn cycle, he should be getting +3/+3. Let's go. Okay, so on this slide, I'm just reiterating that this is a discard theme. The card I have is discard Dark Suspicions. It is a 4 CMC enchantment, and I have just magic cards on the left. So you just imagine cards in your hand or in your opponent's hand. But for this card, this will be about cards in your hand. Let's go. Dark Suspicions, 4 CMC enchantment, 2 black, 2 colors. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player loses 1 life for each card in his or her hand, more than you have in your hand. So if you have 4 cards in your hand, and your opponent has 7 cards in their hand, they lose 3 life. I think this enchantment is really effective because, look, it's only 4 CMC, so you get it out earlier, and it doesn't cost a lot of mana to play. Most of these type of enchantments or effects are going to be 5 CMC. And I think black is a very demanding CMC cost. So this card is a steal, but it plays off the amount of cards you have in your hand and your opponents have in your hand. I think it's very fun. Okay, so the first card that I have for you is Skull Cage. For CMC, it's an artifact that reads, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Skull Cage deals 2 damage to that player unless he or she has exactly 3 or exactly 4 cards in their hand. So why I like this card? Because it's automatically going to do 2 and is encouraging players to keep cards in their hand between 3 or 4. If they don't, they're getting punished. Why is this good? Most of the time, players are trying to play spells. So they're trying, most likely they're going down to 1 to 2 cards, and they need to play a spell. This is just a nice little mind game to make opponents save a card so they don't take 2 and just trigger Valgavoth, at the beginning of their upkeep. And remember, if this effect does happen, Valgavoth gets +1/+1, and you draw a card. So this is a nice little mind game to put on and put pressure on your opponents. Adding to the mind games, we have Iron Maiden for 3 mana. As another artifact. During each of your opponent's upkeep, Iron Maiden deals 1 damage to that player for each card more than 4 in his or her hand. The reason why I like this card, because there's times where your opponents will have more than 4 cards, because that's how the randomization of Magic happens. Some players are just going to have more cards in their hand, and you need to be able to penalize them. Even if you make them discard, they might be discarding 2 and still have 5 cards, but at least you're hitting them for cards excess more than 4. So there's a nice little balance out here, and all just imagine all these artifacts onto the battlefield at one time. Your opponents are just getting their life drained, and Valgavoth is staying alive. Okay, here we go. For CMC, it is a 2/2 artifact creature. It says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Rackling deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of cards in his or her hand fewer than 3. So this is literally the same effect as before, but we want opponents to have 2, 1, or 0 cards in their hand. So they have 2 cards, they take 2 damage. If they have 1 card, they take 1 damage. Just another effect at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. Okay, we got Viceling for 4 mana. It is an artifact creature construct on a 2/2 body. I'm actually assuming Rackling is a construct also. Didn't check to look. But anyways, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Viceling deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of cards in his or her hand minus 4. So this one punishes players for having a lot of cards in their hand. If they have 7 cards in their hand, they are taking 3 damage. Also, I want to shed light that there's players and times you play in your pod where an opponent has drew like their entire deck and has some kind of artifact or card that says no maximum hand size. So just imagine dropping Viceling onto play, and by the time their turn happens, they can take a lot of damage for having that many cards. You want this to be going on. Trust me. So next, I want to discuss how to win with this commander. And I think it's pretty simple. You're going to be doing commander damage. Not a Voltron deck, but commander damage. Let's be real with it. But later on, I do have another way that I think might work. It's a different way to win the game with Valgavoth. Let's check it out. Yeah, so if you're trying to win with commander damage, you're going to need these equipments that can deal a lot of damage. And this equipment is going to be based on the amount of cards you actually have in your hand. So super flexible. The pros of this deck, of this equipment, is if you have no cards in your hand, the equip cost is pretty much 0. If you do have cards in your hand, the buff effect is equal to how many cards in your hand. Wow. Ooh, let me show you. Let me show you. Okay, Hand of Vecna. 3 mana, legendary artifact equipment. Gotta hold the hand like the card. It almost looks like a face hugger from Alien. Anyways, at the beginning of combat on your turn, equip creature or a creature you control named Vecna gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Equip is pay 1 life for each card in your hand. Equip 2. So, like I said, if you have Valgavoth and you have 0 cards in your hand because you play so many cards, hey, it costs 0 to equip, right? Or just pay 2 to equip when you have so many more cards in your hand. It's a win-win. This is a low CMC, low equip cost, exponentially potential equipment. Okay. Um, yeah. So back to how many cards you have in your hand. You would just pay 1 life for each card in your hand. But when you get to that 7 card max, whatever, just pay 2. Pay 2. And once this is equipped, don't worry about even equipping it again. I like this. I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm just showing you a like diagram of the 2 magic cards that you possibly have in your hand. And just remember, on each turn cycle, if you do the triggered effect for Valgavoth, you get another card on each trigger, right? So that way it just keeps increasing. So literally, around each turn cycle. By the time your turn happens, you should get +4/+4, right? Just from the hand of Vecna. Then +3/+3 if you got the effect, the triggered ability on each of your opponents. So that's literally +7/+7, making him an 11/11 by the time your turn comes back around, minimum. Minimum. Okay, so my next win con, I would like to say alternate win con. Alternate win con. It's the deck of many things. For 5 mana, it is a legendary artifact. It's another card from the Dungeons and Dragons Universes Beyond. So I'm about to enlarge the video. I mean, yeah, the large slide so you can actually see what this card does. Disclaimer though, the card has risky value because you can see right below it, it says its owner loses the game. If you don't know this card, bear with me. Okay, so to activate its ability, you need to pay 2 mana, tap it, roll a d20, 20-sided die, and subtract the number of cards in your hand. If the result is 0 or less, discard your hand. Okay, so let me explain that. So let's say you have 7 cards in your hand. So whatever result it is -7. So the more cards in your hand, it's honestly it's a tricky game. It's a tricky game. It's a tricky game. Like if the result is 5 and you have 7 cards in your hand, that's -2. So you would discard your hand. However, that could be good because you can add cards in your deck that have Hellbent. If you don't know what Hellbent is an effect that happens when you have 0 cards in your hand and you can get that card's triggered ability, Hellbent. Otherwise, Hellbent means you have 0 cards in your hand. Okay, now back to the dice rolling. If your die rolled 1 through 9, return a card at random from your graveyard to your hand. I think that's super powerful. Even though it's random, you can get a card back. It could be any card. It could be a card with flashback, so that saves you a flashback effect. Or it could be a creature that you lost. It could be an enchantment, something game winning, maybe. But it goes back into your hand, no other scenario. Next, if you roll between 10 and 19, you draw 2 cards. For 2 mana, you drew 2 cards. That's really good. So even if you went down to 0 from discarding your hand from the card's effect, you're up 2 cards now because you're drawing 2 cards. Now, moving on to the last effect. If you rolled a 20, put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. When that creature dies, its owner loses the game. Yes. So you could take somebody's Suskura Tribe Scout snake thing. You know what that card is. The snake that all you have to do is sack it and you go get a land. If you rolled a 20 and they had that snake in their graveyard, grab that snake out their graveyard, put it on your side of the field, sack it, they lose the game. That would be a disgusting way to win. Disgusting. You know how random that way? How random it was for that to happen? That's why we play Magic the Gathering. The most random stuff happens and the game is so addicting. So let's move on to the next section. Now, honestly, I think this is the most fun that the deck can have. It's all about who has cards, whether you have below 4, below 3, or above 4, above 3, whatever the scenario is, we're going to play off those amount of cards in your opponent's hands. Let's get into it. Okay, we got Vizlor Turlo. For 4 mana, it is a 2/5 legendary creature rogue. Let me say something about him first. We're going to punish people who hold cards in their hands. Punish them. Punish them. Punish them. Because you played in games where players just like to hold cards and not play them. And they just have a bunch of cards in their hand. Let's get them down and hurt them. Okay, he's a legendary creature rogue. He has the effect Deal with the Black Guardian. When Vizlor Turlo enters the battlefield, you may have an opponent gain control of it. If you do, it's goaded for as long as they control it. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. Doctor's Companion. We don't care about the Doctor's Companion. What you need to know about this card is when you play it, you can literally give it to an opponent, and that creature is goaded. This creature is goaded. That means it has to attack an opponent. It is a beefy creature at 2/5. So most likely when somebody's swinging with a 2/5, it stays on the board. Okay, so if this card stays on the board under your opponent's control, they go to the second effect. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So bam, if they had 4 cards, they drew an extra card, they lose 5 life just for having this creature. Mm, mm. It's tough. Like I can't imagine. Like at first, giving players cards is bad. You would think, all right, but also giving players cards is good because you might need to help out a player to get them back into the game. So this card is a good political card at the same time hurting an opponent. But everything has a price, and this triggers. You can make this trigger multiple times. If you had a roaming throne, it would be 2 cards. And this honestly, this card would be really good for Nekuzar, honestly, too. Okay. I don't even know how to pronunciate this card's name. Psychorax Commander, a rakdos colored creature alien soldier for 2 colors, black and a red, and a 4/2. Okay, let me show you what you're going to do with this card. We are going to punish card holders again. Punish, punish, punish. So we can trigger Valgavoth. Remember. Okay, cool. So Psychorax Commander has first strike, haste, 4/2 body. The effect is Sanctified Rules of Combat. When it ATBs, each opponent faces a villainous choice. That means each opponent has to make a decision about one of these 2 effects. The first one, that opponent discards all the cards in their hand, then draws that many cards -1. Okay, so this is a good card to play on players when they have cards in their hand, right? The next ability is Psychorax Commander deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So what's going to happen is your opponents have to choose. If they have cards in their hand, as in a lot of cards in their hand, they will discard that hand and draw that many cards -1. It's a will effect, but they actually go down 1. So if they have 4 cards, discard all 4 and draw 3. That hurts. It's not a +1 here. This is very detrimental. Or they could just take 4 damage for having the cards in their hand. Why is this good? It gives you information about their hand. So a player who does not discard their hand likes their hand and gives you the information that, hey, they are holding something that could be potentially detrimental to me or beneficial to me or to the group, whatever. Or also the first villainous choice where they discard their hand and draw that many cards -1 could help them out where they are looking for a card. Okay, so bonus cards, they're budget friendly cards. These are the cards that I think are reprinted, old, budget friendly, but they have a nice little synchronization that actually should keep a slot in this deck build if you build it. Um, 50 likes, I will show you the deck list for this deck. All right, we got the Ivory Tower for 1 mana. This is our early game card. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, gain 1 life for each card in your hand in excess of 4. Early game, this is great. You're going to have 6, 7 cards in your hand, 5 cards in your hand. Okay. But remember, if we have Valgavoth on the battlefield and we are using his ability and getting those triggers, that means that's 3 cards. Woo, 3 cards by the time your turn happens. And that's not even including other effects. So if you are at 7 and Valgavoth triggers the entire turn cycle, you're at 10 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. So you would gain 6 life. Ooh, in a Rakdos deck, that's a lot. That's a lot. Sneaky good. Okay, I'm pulling up a classic card here. This is Cage Mara First to Suffer from the Kamigawa sets. I forgot which one, but it's the old Kamigawa. Sneaky good. I actually like this because I've never seen this card played. I don't think it's a good commander in general, but for this deck, I think it perfectly works. What you need to know about this card, it is a sitting board wipe. If you play it, let it be on the field. Let your opponents know that you can eliminate the board if necessary. It's not coming from your hand. It's on the battlefield, and it puts panic into what they're trying to play and what to play next, if they have an answer. Or they could waste a targeted removal on it, which would be wasteful for them. Card advantage, y'all. Card advantage. Okay, so remember, Cage Morrow is a 5 CMC black creature, legendary demon spirit, right? Its power and toughness is star star. It says, Cage Morrow first to suffer's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. Tap a black mana, sacrifice Cage Morrow. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So, ideally, you would like Cage Morrow and Valgavoth on the battlefield at the same time. So depending on how many cards in your hand, you could wipe the board and keep Valgavoth on the battlefield. But you don't have to do this. You just have access to do this. Your opponent's looking at Valgavoth trying to get rid of that. But if a player plays something a little bit out of control and you need to get rid of it, but you have enough cards in your hand, or you can just do a certain amount of -X. Cage Morrow is your answer. So you don't have to completely board wipe like -7, -7 because you have 7 cards in your hand. No, he could be -3, -3 because you have 3 cards in your hand, and you can get rid of a bunch of uh, creature tokens that have gone wide. Very powerful on presence board wipe. And my final card is Nightmare Unmaking, 5 CMC sorcery. Choose one. First, exile each creature with power greater than the number of cards in your hand. If you have 0 cards in your hand, you can exile all creatures. Second one is exile each creature with power less than the number of cards in your hand. So if you have 6 cards in your hand, all the creatures that are 5 and less are gone. So that way you kind of manipulate what stays on the board here. That's why this card is good. And I'm not gonna lie, it has a fun factor to it because if you have Valgavoth, supposedly, potentially, you have been drawing cards. Yo, so Valgavoth, uh, awesome commander, rakdos commander. It is very, I would say, equipment focused, or to win, you're doing commander damage. That's what I must say. And I like the idea of this discard theme and having cards that pay off because your opponents have certain amount of cards in their hand. I think this X factor is just more intriguing. It's just random. Hopefully you like this idea. Let me know in the comments if you think it would be fun or wouldn't be fun, or add cards in the deck idea in the comment section below. Let me know. Peace out, y'all. Like, comment, and subscribe.